Okay, welcome to this explainer. Have you ever wondered how the ultra-wealthy seem to pay literally zero in taxes, while the rest of us just watch a massive chunk of our paycheck completely vanish every single month? Seriously, it can feel like they're playing an entirely different game with a secret set of cheat codes. Well, today we're gonna decode that game. But look, instead of getting bogged down in dense, boring tax codes and mind-numbing accounting jargon, we're gonna take a little trip into the metaphorical jungle. We're going to look at the economic ecosystem through a lens that makes the insanely complex actually surprisingly simple and, frankly, pretty fascinating.
Now, you might be thinking, wait, why metaphors? Isn't economics supposed to be all about hard data and numbers? Well, as the economist Deirdre McCloskey points out, metaphors are actually completely foundational to how we understand complex systems. I mean, even our most basic economic concepts like supply and demand curves, those are really just metaphors we use to visualize human behavior. We basically need these mental bridges to cross from what we already know to what we need to learn.
And this whole idea is championed by Peter Coy and his work on teaching economics without numbers. He makes this great argument that where dry numbers totally fail to convey meaning, metaphors actually succeed in building true intuition. So, to really wrap our heads around the mechanics of wealth and taxation, we're just going to leave the spreadsheets completely behind and meet some fascinating primates. We'll look at how different monkeys in our jungle earn, spend, and protect their bananas. Because as it turns out, the rules treat you very, very differently depending on exactly how you gather your fruit.
Section 1. Mongo and the Tax Monster, the Worker's Plight.
Let's introduce our main character. Meet Mongo. He's a super hardworking employee who basically represents the vast majority of us just trying to navigate the modern economy. His economic model is pretty straightforward. He trades his time, his hours, his energy, a totally non-renewable resource, in exchange for leaves, which act as our jungle currency. Now, on the flip side, meet Don Bonanno. He's a massively wealthy monkey who absolutely does not sell his time. Instead, he owns assets, like a massive, constantly expanding banana tree. And this single crucial distinction right here, selling your time versus owning assets, is the literal root of why their tax burdens are universes apart.
But hey, before we get to Don Bonanno's secrets, let's just clear up a massive misconception that keeps regular workers like Mongo totally stressed out. Have you ever heard someone complain, "Oh, I don't want that raise, it's just going to push me into a higher tax bracket and I'll actually end up taking home less money"? It is a remarkably common fear. But is it actually true? Does working harder to earn more leaves really result in you having fewer leaves in your pocket at the end of the day?
Well, the short answer is absolutely no, and this candy monster metaphor helps explain exactly why. Try to think of the tax system not as just one single giant bite, but as a monster guarding a staircase. So as you earn more, you step up. The monster only gets to eat a percentage of the new candy you earn on that specific higher step. Actually, all the candy you already collected on the lower steps, that's perfectly safe at its lower original tax rate. This is exactly how marginal tax brackets work. So Mongo is always going to end up with more candy. If he gets a raise, the monster just takes a slightly larger slice of that extra new bit. In theory, it's a fair system, designed so that the very first pile of money you need just to survive is taxed super lightly. However, even with the candy monster being somewhat fair on paper, Mongo still has a massive, glaring disadvantage. As a regular employee, Mongo never actually gets to see his full pile of leaves. The chief monkey, who represents the government in our jungle, swoops right in and takes its cut of income tax before the leaves ever even hit Mongo's hands. Mongo gets his paycheck and poof, half of it is literally already gone to income tax and Social Security. He's then forced to just figure out how to survive, pay rent, and buy food with whatever tiny bit is left over. He has absolutely zero control over this entire process.
Section 2. Buy, borrow, and die. The rich monkey's strategy.
All right, now let's pivot and see how the other half actually lives. The real secret here lies in something called phantom gains. Let's say Don Bonanno's giant banana tree, which represents real estate or maybe a massive stock portfolio, was worth 1 million leaves last year. Well, this year, the jungle market totally booms, and suddenly his tree is worth 2 million leaves. On paper, Forbes magazine declares Don Bonanno is 1 million leaves richer. Good for him, right? But how much tax does he actually pay on that new million? Zero. Exactly 0%. Why? Because until he actually chops down the tree and sells the wood, that wealth is just a phantom or an unrealized gain. The tax monster can only take a bite when you actually sell.
But here's the obvious dilemma, right? Don Bonanno wants to go buy a brand new luxury car today. He obviously can't pay for it with tree bark. And if he sells a piece of the tree just to get the cash, well, the tax monster is going to immediately bite off 25% or more in capital gains tax. So he uses the ultimate wealthy playbook. It's often called buy, borrow, die. Step 1, buy and hold the asset, in this case, the tree. Step 2,
Go straight to the jungle bank and borrow money using that massive tree as collateral. And step 3, eventually die, passing the tree to his heirs, which magically resets the whole tax value and completely wipes out the old gains. But we really need to look closer at step 2 because frankly, that is where the magic trick happens.
Okay, this is the massive aha moment of this whole explainer. When Don Bonanno borrows 100,000 leaves from the bank against his tree, that money hits his pocket as a loan, not as income. And here is the golden absolute rule of the jungle. Debt is not taxed. There is no income tax on a loan, none. So Don Bonanno now has a 100,000 perfectly clean, totally tax-free leaves to go buy his luxury car. He basically gets all the amazing spending power of a massive income without ever actually triggering a taxable event. It's wild.
Now I know what you're probably thinking. Wait a second, doesn't he have to pay the bank back with interest? Well, yeah, he does. But let's actually compare those costs. The cost of borrowing against a highly valuable, totally secure asset is incredibly low. We're talking maybe 3 or 4% in interest. Now compare that to poor Mongo, who is paying up to 40 or 50% of his wages in income tax just to get actual cash in his hand. For Don Bonanno, paying a tiny 4% fee to the bank is vastly, vastly cheaper than paying a 50% fee to the government. And next year, as his tree just naturally grows even bigger, he just takes out a slightly larger loan to pay off the first one. It becomes this incredible infinite loop of tax-free liquidity.
Section 3. The Corporate Banana Shield.
So, Don Bonanno adds an entirely different layer of armor to protect his wealth. And to understand this shield, we have to look at the massive difference in the order of operations for taxation. See, Mongo is a persona physica, a physical person of flesh and blood. And as we saw earlier, he earns, pays his taxes immediately, and then just desperately tries to survive on what's left. But Don Bonanno, he operates through a persona juridica, a corporate entity. Let's just call it Platinos Socia. An entity gets to play by a completely different set of rules. It earns money, it spends whatever it needs to operate, and it only pays taxes on the profit that remains at the very end of the line. This flip in the order literally changes everything.
Because Don Bonanno fully controls the company, he can legally funnel his entire luxury lifestyle right through it. That flashy new luxury Tronco Mobile, well, on paper, it's simply a corporate fleet vehicle required for essential business. That lavish dinner at the most expensive restaurant in the jungle? Oh, that's just an important client meeting. The weekend trip to the beach? Obviously, that is the annual shareholder congress. Every single one of these expenses heavily reduces the company's profit. If the company makes 1 million leaves but manages to spend 1 million leaves on business expenses, well, the profit is zero. And therefore, the corporate tax is zero. Don Bonanno lives exactly like a king, but on paper, his company is basically broke.
And hey, if Platinos SA somehow still has profits left over after all that, Don Bonanno just plays the shell game. He might create a second company way over in a totally different part of the jungle, let's call it Panamono, where taxes happen to be incredibly low. He then charges his own local company a massive fee for something abstract like brand licensing. The money legally flies right out of the high-tax jungle and lands perfectly safe in the low-tax jungle. By just moving these profits around, the local tax authorities are left looking at a completely empty shell. It's a highly sophisticated, completely legal game of keep-away.
Section 4. Rules of the Jungle.
So we've seen how selling your time traps you, while owning assets and leveraging debt completely frees you. But the absolute most important takeaway here is that Don Bonanno is not a criminal. He isn't sneaking leaves around in a briefcase at midnight. Everything he is doing, from the tax-free loans against unrealized gains to the clever corporate expense deductions, it's all 100% legal. As the sources point out, the tax code is absolutely full of holes, but those holes are shaped exactly like Don Bonanno. Mongo gets stuck just because he doesn't fit the mold. The system isn't broken at all. It is functioning exactly as it was designed to by the asset owners who helped write the rules in the first place.
When we finally look at the actual scoreboard, the marginal effective tax rate, the disparity is just staggering. Mongo, working incredibly hard every single day, giving up his finite time, ends up giving back 40 to 50% of his value to the system. Don Bonanno, utilizing his corporate structures and clever debt leverage against his constantly growing banana tree, pays an effective rate of maybe 1 to 5%. It's pretty clear. The system heavily penalizes labor and heavily subsidizes ownership and debt.
Which leaves us with a pretty stark, provocative reality. We all live in this jungle, and the rules are crystal clear. The ecosystem heavily rewards those who own the trees, not those who pick the fruit. The goal here really isn't to be angry at Don Bonanno. The real goal is to truly understand the game he's playing. So, as you look at your own financial life today, ask yourself, are you just selling your time for leaves, or are you starting to plant your own trees? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope it changes the way you look at the jungle around you.